Today's talk is titled Social Justice and the Practice of Enough, to be delivered by Patricia Taylor. Dr. Patricia Taylor's career has spanned 53 years in education, with an emphasis in special education. She has been a classroom teacher, a school principal, a Unity Director of Special Education Programs, and the founder of the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning, and Wellness at the University of La Verne. She is currently Professor Emerita at the University of La Verne. Dr. Taylor earned her PhD in depth psychology at the Pacifica Graduate Institute. Here she studied the work of depth psychologists like Carl Jung, mythologists like Joseph Campbell, archetypal theorists like James Hillman, and social justice and ecological activists like Mary Watkins and David Abrams. Her dissertation, entitled The Archetype of Enough at Threshold and in Dialogue, chaired by mythopoetic scholar Dennis Slattery, has enchanted her academic work, writing, and imagination long before it was written. Her contribution to Seeing in the Dark, Wisdom Works by Black Women in Depth Psychology provides an example of how one might activate the original idea of enough. Her advocacy is centered in etymological storytelling, the opening of words to their deeper and original meanings as a way of expanding our consciousness to inner ways of knowing and being. Patricia.
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to try to be new school here, keep track of time. This morning, I want to share some words with you that have to do with social justice and that are sort of a gift to us from our ancestors. So we're going to go old school. We're going to go way, way back. The words hold whole worlds for us. And as we go back to hear what the ancestors had to say, sometimes it gives us new energy, new ideas, new imagination as to how we can be in the world. And so the three words that we're going to explore today are enough, social, and justice. So the ancestors didn't mean anything having to do with amount or quantity when they used the word gina, which is the origin word for enough, Sanskrit and German, which means together reaching. And to make it more contemporary, we'll just say reaching together. Social comes from the idea of companionship. And companionship was originally compagnon, with bread. So sociability was all about nurturing ourselves or others, feeding each other, our souls and our bodies. Justice had nothing to do with laws and things that we associate it with now. It had to do with beauty. The original idea of justice meant fair, fair with an E, not fair like giving everybody the same. And that fair meant beauty. So enough social justice would be reaching together to nurture and nourish ourselves and others in a beautiful way. Very different than some of what we think about today, yes? I think words are like condensed stories, and they empower us when we sort of reconstitute them. And so that's what I'm hoping to do a little bit of today. So let's talk about the folks, two fellas, that decided to bring these two words to our consciousness. One was Boethius, Precious Boethius, 500, mid 500s of the Common Era, a senator, an orphan, who was put into a high political post. And he, in Roman Visigoth times, was in charge of money, helped us sort of figure out currency. That's sounding a little bit like a mount in enough, but hold on. He also worked on time and actually designed some of the first water clocks. And just parenthetically, I'm going to just put this in for your thinking, maybe for another time. Time and the measurement of time was not meant to get to a place on time, was not meant to put in a certain amount of time. It was meant to make space for honoring the divine. That's what time was until we started to mechanize it. So currency, time, now we're getting a little bit closer to enough. Well, for his efforts at social justice to bring together the Pope from Rome and the Visigoths that were taking hold of the land, he was put in prison, much of what many social justice activists are. And there he engaged in a conversation which is now known as the consolation of philosophy. And he talked to this Dame Philosophy, asking, what is the nature of good and evil? I imagine him sitting in prison saying, how did I get here? What did I do? All I was trying to do was bring these two cultures together. In that conversation, he did it in Latin, but the essence of good and evil was all about reaching together, coming together, even good and evil, coming together and meeting each other. Okay, so horrible things happened to him and he died. But someone snuck his written version of the Consolation of Philosophy out. And who does it end up with? It ends up with King Alfred the Great. Now, he was a social justice king. He wanted his people to be fed. He wanted to take care of the needy. And his big interest, which of course makes him dear to my heart, was he wanted to bring literature to his people. He wanted them to be literate. He said, my people need to know how to read. So among the books that he translated was The Consolation of Philosophy. And as he read it and was making it comprehensible to his people, he introduced Guinaw. And so you can see it in his original work, Guinaw. So his literacy had to do with helping his people understand how to bring good and evil, how to reach together to solve the problems in the world. So those are our two ancient social justice fellows. Don't you like them already? Yeah, I do. Again, remember, none of this had to do with these words. Satisfaction. Satisfaction means to weigh things. Think of a scale, the old-fashioned scale. You put the offense or something you're looking at on one side of the scale, and then you do something on the other side of the scale to balance it out. Think Shylock and a pound of flesh, all of that. That's satisfactory to an amount of something. And the other word, sufficient, which has also been associated with enough, is to do something. These words got reconstituted in the Renaissance. So now here we are, having forgotten or even sort of re-orphaned Boethius and forgotten the true meaning of enough. And we're talking about doing things and having enough time and having sufficient money, when that's all fine to discuss. But what the ancestors wanted us to know about enough is that it doesn't have to do with an amount of things. It doesn't have to do with what we're doing. It has to do with reaching together. And as a depth psychologist, the first thing that I would offer is before we start reaching together with other people, we had better reach together with ourselves and go deep within. Sort of like the songs that we've been hearing, the lyrics in the songs, going and the readings, going deep within the self. And here's how I imagine it in a nothing with me, is that if I don't stand clearly and sturdily and firmly in who I am, the good and the bad. Remember Boethius, he's looking at both things, the good and the bad. I'm off, I'm not sure-footed. I'm sort of off balance in the sense that I don't quite know who I am. And so when I reach out a hand to help someone else, how am I doing that? If I'm off balance, I'm not strong enough, sturdy enough to help that other person. And so as a depth psychologist, we always think, or I always think, about going inside, yes? And one of the songs reminded me of this notion that, it reminded me of what the ancients did, the crones and the elder women of a village. When a baby was born, they would take the baby and circle around the baby, and they'd bring the baby up to their ear and listen. What were they listening for? They were listening for what this being was bringing into the world, what they were meant to bring into the world from the other side. And then they would give the baby back and weep and wail. What were they crying about? They were crying because they knew that it would take all of that human being's efforts to get themselves remembering what they came in this world to do. Because the world was going to be batting them around and saying, don't have imagination, don't get lost in your art, don't speak up, don't get angry. The world was going to start to shape them, and whatever they were meant to bring into this world, they were going to forget. And that made them very, very sad. Makes me sad too. Mary Oliver, wonderful, wonderful poet, has a poem called The Journey. And that poem sort of captures this. So I'm going to read it for you. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles, mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough. And a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own. That kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save, your own. Doing enough in social justice. The ancestors gave us a gift, and it is clearly to do enough in social justice is to reach together in a nourishing, nurturing way that is beautiful to you, is beautiful to the world. And how do you do this? Through deep listening to figuring out what is it about me that I am gifting to the world, by asking others whether it's the weed that you're trying to decide should you take out of the patch of land here in Cambria that you're trying to make pretty. Is that really a weed? Spending some time thinking about that. Or asking the ocean, what is it exactly that you want me to do? Or asking another person. By listening deeply to ourselves and then by asking questions and then listening. What do people want? What does the earth want? What does the ocean want? We have a deep knowing in ourselves that can hear that. It takes practice. The way I do it is I'm just, going along in my own imaginal world, and then all of a sudden an idea or a thought comes to me, and I go, where did that come from? And when that happens, I say, okay, I'm hearing the voice of soul from somewhere else, not just from me. So one of my favorite poets, and poets, boy, do they listen deeply. They just sit there and they just listen, and then things come to them. Well, in terms of social justice and this reaching together in a beautiful way and nurturing, Langston Hughes does some wonderful, wonderful work. But he has one poem that I read a lot to folks because I think it represents this idea so well, and it causes us to listen as well. And it's I Too by Langston Hughes. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. So we thank Boethius for tackling this problem and sacrificing his life. We thank King Arthur for translating the constellation of philosophy and making it available to us. We thank the idea of enough because it gives us a different way to see what we're all about and what we're wanting to do. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for being here. I'm grateful for the idea of enough, and I hope that it's touched you in some way to think about these ideas. And so I will say, as I close, for 35 years, my lectures at the University of La Verne, and I continue to say it, go gently with enough.